Well, everybody, I'm real excited to have my guest today. Welcome, Eddie, to the Flower Podcast.
Wow, I'm super excited to be here today.
I am a big fan of what you do, especially this time of year. And I have wanted to learn more about this process. And we have a lot of flower farmers who follow along our podcast. We have a lot of florists that listen in. And so I'd love to hear how you got into this farming world that you're in, and why, and maybe why you've chosen the path you're on.
Oh boy, that's a really good question, a long answer to it. Yeah, I was born into it. And I thought at the time that until probably like maybe 10 years ago, I thought everyone was born into the farming business, that you never kind of came from the outside into it. It was more like a multi-generational thing for the most part. So my we've been in the farming business for quite a long time, and so have some of our family members or relatives have been. So there's a little bit of a history there for sure.
Interesting. So, how long has your family been on this property?
Oh, so on this property since 1932,
Oh my goodness. And how much land do you have?
about around 300 acres.
Wow. Okay. And you are located in or around the Skagit Valley. Is that
Oh, we got to clear that up. It's Skagit like magic.
Skagit?
Skagit, I know it's a indigenous word. And yeah, a lot of people say Skagit. And
You know what? We're going to cut that out. That's what we're going to do with that, because I can't believe I said that.
So sometimes they say the magic Skagit, so that
Okay.
people say Skagit.
Okay. So,
Probably, yeah, because there's Whatcom County north of us, and Snohomish County south of us. There's Skykomish, Stillaguamish, Nisqually. It's like yada yada yada. There's
sure.
all these different words that most people have never heard of before, unless you live in this area.
Right, of course. Well, I'm just wondering, to kind of, uh, wow, has the farm always been, I know like right now, this time of year, you guys are known for the pumpkins and all the amazing things that go along with that this time of year. What is the farm always been known for that, or what else do you guys grow year round?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, we have sort of boiled it down to the most part into pumpkins and squash. And we do a few other things like grass, hay, and sometimes some seed crops like that. But the bulk of it is now all these different varieties of pumpkins and squashes that we grow.
And
Farming is always changing, it's evolving, and it's just for many reasons: interest, market, just a lot of different reasons.
sure. Um, how many different
We used to grow a lot of different types of crops in the past, and as consumers' tastes have changed, or just corporations taking over other businesses, those dynamics are different now.
Okay. So when does your so when if that's the case, then how does everything start? Like, when do you start planting? How does this, like, run us through your calendar year maybe?
Oh yeah, gosh, it starts probably like sometimes too early, right after it's all over. I'll start looking at some catalogs and things like that back starting in November, just to kind of get a feel for what's out there and what's available. And if I need just to start placing some early orders, so I can kind of lock down on some varieties to make sure that we will be receiving that we are guaranteed to get that seed. And so that process of ordering seed can start sometime in November and finish up sometimes like in the first parts of March. And that's
Okay.
just like looking, at different catalogs, talking to, reps from different seed companies like that, and just to see what's out there, what's available, and just kind of getting my feel for what I think is interesting. I think it's going to be viable, and just kind of getting a feel from customers what they'll be interested in.
So do you do surveys and things like that to get feedback, or?
Well, I don't do like official surveys, but like right now when we have customers coming in to buy stuff, that's kind of like your best survey to kind of like, as they're interacting with the product, then you can kind of see when you have that direct market type of business going, you can gauge the consumer interest very easily compared to if you're growing things like we have in the past, where you're growing for a processor for another company. And then from there, it goes to another person until it heads to the store. Well, you never see the consumer, and you never see what the response is. This way, you see a much clearer response, and then you can adapt to that response.
Sure. So how many different varieties of pumpkins and squash do you grow?
120 to 130.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea it was that many.
And
Wow.
there's a lot more out there than that. This is like just a kind of a snapshot, a big snapshot of what's available. And that's always constantly evolving and changing each year. I mean, rarely do I drop something, but once in a while I drop something and then bring something new in that's maybe a better or more improved on that variety or a better look than the previous one was.
Hmm. So do you often feel like, I mean, this is kind of a silly question, but do you ever get tired of pumpkins?
Oh yeah, sure. I get tired of it at times. So there's no doubt about that. I mean, and but for the most part, the interest is always there still. I'm always kind of excited about seeing that next variety, or out in the field you see a mutation in something that's really interesting. And but no, it's for the most part it's really good. It's
Yeah,
like I said, it's very evolving all the time. New varieties of pumpkins. It's kind of like almost not in hyperdrive, but there's a lot happening in that world that's kind of moved away from just the traditional orange pumpkins. There's just like a wider color range, palette shapes, sizes, and things like that. So it's a very expanding world that's happening. And that's changing a lot because there's a lot more direct marketing, or different types of businesses are selling pumpkins. Traditionally, when it was grocery store like that, they would oftentimes have a heavy hand in saying, well, it needs to be this size and this and this and this, so it can move through a register or something like that. And so that in the past would really create very limiting looking pumpkins and shapes and things like that. And I would think that was actually true with all produce. But once you can kind of get it from more into direct sales from farms to market, the opportunities open up a lot more for a much more expanded range of product.
sure.
It's a little bit more consumer based than it became sort of grocery store based, and the people that run the grocery stores and what they want you to see and not see.
Hmm. Now that's a valid point. So
That's true
getting
in the flower business.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of other factors I think that play along, like with the flowers, like shelf life,
Yes.
longevity, yeah, things
Yeah,
like that.
all those variables for sure.
Yeah. So who buys most of your product? I mean, do you just sell, like, what are the different ways or different channels you move them through?
Most of it's directly to a person's home, for displaying in their yard or in their house. There are definitely these more boutique businesses that buy product to sell, oftentimes in more urban areas, nurseries, garden centers like that are sometimes more upper scale, um, go for that kind of product, most definitely. But for the most part, it is, from here to home.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you find that because of that, do you trying to think of the way to put this question? Um, what's fascinating to me about what you do is growing up, as a kid, a long time ago, all I remember seeing were the traditional orange pumpkins, like you even still see in a lot of grocery stores today. And
Right.
I feel like it's probably been over, I don't know how many years now, they have this explosion and palette of all the colors and shapes and sizes and everything about that, which has come into what we know now and almost take for granted, but they're so amazing. What is that evolution been like? I mean, how long has this been going on this way? And since your family's been doing it for so long, maybe this has always been going on, and I'm just
Oh,
new.
it's a slow evolution for sure. Um, Kind of started back, I think, like in the early 90s. And it started mainly, I mean, there might have been other publications or reference points, and of course, a lot of these older varieties, maybe you could call it, say, heirloom varieties, have always existed, but they just never had the presence in the marketplace. But like Martha Stewart Living published in the early 90s, like that, a article about these different varieties, these heirlooms like Rouge de Tempe and that. And that sort of sparked because it was something that was kind of brought out to the masses all of a sudden to see. And so it started taking those varieties out of the shadows or forgotten because the grocery stores, this is what we want. This is what we're interested in. This is what we think the market wants, you know. So those things sort of disappeared. And, you know, Martha Stewart was always kind of good at, or still is good at, kind of showcasing things that sometimes there's cool and interesting, but we've forgotten about. And that's where it started slowly. And you know, before internet, you were kind of scrounging through catalogs to find these things. And then you were trying to figure out where the catalogs are at. Who are the seed companies across the country? So it's a slow process of finding those varieties. And then I don't know how many years you would say it is now, but there's been this sort of now this explosion based in these heirloom varieties of creating new interpretations, new styles, new looks, and everything. So you're seeing all this stuff now kind of come to the marketplace in this great way. And it's exciting me, and it's also exciting for the seed breeders to be creating these interesting, because they get excited if they can come up with a green and white patterned pumpkin or pinks and blues all mixed together in a pumpkin. You know, it kind of is, you know, the limitations have been sort of dropped to the wayside. And that gets, yeah, there's a lot of creativity that can happen all of a sudden, a lot of exploration of what's possible. Not to say anything bad about orange pumpkins. There's incredible, beautiful orange pumpkins and new varieties coming out all the time with beautiful sutures to them, beautiful stems and things like that, and really beautiful shapes also being developed that are more exaggerated, more not just like looking like basketballs.
Sure. You know, that kind of leads me to a thought. Now, I know there's small varieties, there's mediums. I mean, there's all these different sizes, all these different types. Some of them are tougher, probably, you know, as far as
Yeah, some seem to have a lot more endurance into them. You meaning they don't rot as easily.
right.
I mean, you can have, if you treat it right, some varieties you can have for over a year in your
Wow.
house. I mean, just, and then some, you know, just kind of collapse after a certain period of time.
Interesting. Well, and that is kind of why I'm thinking. So, do you have to plant all these varieties basically the same time, or do you get to stagger them because they have different days to maturity?
It probably depends on what part of the country you live in. Here, yeah, we do some degree of staggered planting. It just really depends on our weather and things like that here, what we can pull off and what our summers will end up being like, if they'll be cool, if they'll be hot. But yeah, you can stagger definitely. And we do we plant probably pumpkins, you know, in a month time period, in a
Mm.
4 week period of time, a
And
period of
then,
time, I would say 4 to 6 weeks.
okay. And then harvesting, like, do you, some of the varieties that are ready earlier, do you harvest in store, or are they
Oh,
able to stay in the field?
they stay in the field and then come in. And so we open on the 27th, and we are just about done getting the stand filled for the first round. And now they're going to slowly start picking to get the reserves in place to come in after that. Yeah, pumpkins, I don't care what the variety is. Some are worse than others, but if they're kept in storage for long periods of time, in boxes kind of next to one another, they sort of, their colors start to degrade a bit. They don't always look as great. So it's
Sure.
kind of field and as we go. And of course, the colorations, even our variety will change over the season from, these kind of fresher colors right now into a little bit more deeper saturated colors as we get further along in our picking time period.
Sure.
But here, our picking time period is a lot different than other places in the country, just
So,
based on weather.
right. And because it's so much cooler there, isn't it?
It's cooler, but we probably typically won't have a hard freeze, knock on wood, until sometime in November. So, I mean, we will have frost maybe in October, but nothing drastically cold. It'll be cool, but not cold.
Hmm.
It could be extremely wet, but yeah, no. Yeah, like if you're in New England or Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Dakotas like that, you're looking, sometimes you can have really cold weather in September.
Right.
Winter can come pretty quickly. And here, winter can drag itself in very slowly. Just
Well, and I
depends.
well, and I know that I've heard that your biggest thing this time of year is really more the wet season. Like it's almost like it just, I don't know. I know I've heard people who grow dahlias and they have challenges sometimes just because it's so wet, digging and things like that.
Yeah, right now we're in a dry period still. We haven't seen much rain yet, but usually, yes, October, November especially November, can be very wet.
Mm. Well,
Yeah.
right. Well, we have a lot of flower farmers who I know listen, and florists who are trying to also learn about some of these things. But one of the things I love is being able to grow a crop that kind of, I won't say it's on autopilot, but it kind of takes care of itself for the most part. I think. I don't know. That's why I want to find out, because I feel like a lot of farmers, flower farmers, are trying to look for ways to sort of diversify their income streams, especially in the fall. And they're busy growing a lot of flowers. They're tired of a lot of different things because they've been working so hard for so many months. And I'm just curious if pumpkins could possibly be one of those add-on crops that would be interesting for them to bring to their markets. Um, yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, it depends on how big their farm is because pumpkins take a lot of space.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering, because I know like how much space do you give like I don't even know how to ask the question, like per plant. Is that, it's probably silly. Um
Couple feet, I would say, per plant you would give them. It really depends. But they need a lot of space. They take up a lot of space. And so that's kind of like where you can grow like a lot of flowers in a small area. You wouldn't be able to grow a lot of pumpkins in a small area. So you would have to think about that. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be growing pumpkins or have a few pumpkins to grow or purchase, especially if you're a florist, like that, to purchase pumpkins from maybe a larger grower. But that is sort of the, I was like, somebody sent me a message and saying like this plant, it's getting bigger by the day. It's running up the porch, it's running up the, it's just like it's something out of a little shop of horrors, and I said like, oh yeah, and now pumpkin plants or squash like that, unless they're bush varieties. Bush varieties will be more compact, but they don't have the classic Cinderella fairy tale heirloom style at all. those are all, as I best to my knowledge, there could be some that I'm not thinking of, but they tend to be plants that vine.
Mm. So how many pumpkins do you get off of one plant?
Oh, it really depends. You can guarantee to have two, but you can have more than that for sure. It just really depends on the variety um, of that plant. Yeah,
Mm.
it really varies, but two, you can guarantee two for the most part, and you can probably go to three or four. Sometimes, like the acorns and the squashes, they will produce clusters of fruit. So there's obviously more on there than that.
Sure, sure. Uh, and I've wondered a lot of times too. There's got to be, I don't know, some varieties that produce more prolifically.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
curious. Yeah,
like pumpkins, mini pumpkins, that Jack B. Littles or Baby Blue like that, they'll produce a string of fruit on that vine for sure. But like Daybreak, Rouge de Tombe, one too many like that, two, maybe three at the most fruits that they'll produce.
mm,
Uh, and it'd be of a quality of size.
sure. What do you feel like is your number one variety that everybody, sells wise?
Oh, just like in the specialty world and those kind of more fairy tale style. It's still Rouge de Tombe, the French reds.
Mm,
Coloration, it's just, there's still nothing quite like it. And it's very beautiful. Yeah,
mm,
the color is just startling. It's really a beautiful red. It's not a blushy blue red or anything or pinky red. It's a brilliant red.
wow.
And people pick that up. But people are moving to all different kind of colorations, more, marbled coloring or mottled, with multiple shades on a pumpkin is increasingly popular. Pumpkins that are kind of the soft pastels, pinks, and light blues are very popular. Yeah, I mean, it's in the last, it wasn't always that way. It took quite a while for people to kind of get into these different varieties. And we definitely in the past had a period of time where those kind of varieties sold and then they stopped selling during the season. But now people buy them throughout the whole season. And because they've just kind of, sometimes it takes a while for the market to adapt or consumers to adapt to things.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know it's funny. One year I tried growing, I'm trying to think what the variety was now. I want to say, is there one that's like a tiger stripe? It's like white with an orange kind of stripe
Yes.
in it. I can't remember
Yes.
the,
There's one called Zeppelin that's like that.
yeah,
And
I think that
yeah.
was it. Yeah. And when I planted it, it did really well. I mean, the vines were very vigorous and we had some pumpkins, but they were so early. Like I felt like I should have planted them down in the South much later than I did, maybe.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
think south and those areas you can plant later and obviously have viable crops in September and October. Here we typically, for the most part, plant earlier. We tend to try to have it finished up by June 1st.
as far as planting or as far as,
Planting, yes.
okay, by June
June
1st. Oh, well.
June 1st, second, like that. We need a good, strong 3 and sometimes a half months to have product that's in full coloration and is hardened in, that it's still not soft.
So do you think with
Because
the,
you have to go through those different phases with the fruit. It's got to set fruit. It's got to grow. That fruit has to expand out in size, and then it kind of moves into color and hard. It has to harden. It can't be soft. So it kind of goes through this phase where it becomes this hard thing. Um, and then like I said, during the fall, it kind of goes through other slight changes in coloration as it ages and matures, and that also affects, especially ones that are edible, the quality of the the flesh.
Hmm. So what varieties are known that you grow for their flavor, if for edibility?
Oh yeah, I mean the one we like the most is winter luxury, just because it's it's kind of has like it's an orange and it has sort of like a slight netting on the outside of it, not quite like but kind of reminiscent of cantaloupe, but not that scaled or sutured or patterned on there. But it's really nice. It's easy to cook. It has a really creamy texture to it. So it's always one that I recommend a lot to eat. And then some of the old cheese style pumpkins, like all Long Island cheese like that, are good to eat. They're a little bit different in their taste. They're a little bit more, especially when you cut them open, they have a more of a cucumber melon smell to them. But they're really nice also.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I, I'm just kind of curious, and I'm not. You may not want to share this secret information, but I'm curious. What are some of the best companies you use to source your seed?
Oh, I mean, there's just so many, and they're all pretty equal in measure in doing their job. But Harris Seeds, Rupp Seeds, Holmes, Osborne. A really good one is Outstanding Seed. The seed breeders, his name is Jamie Hoffman. I mean, they're all there. I mean, if you typed in Daybreak, you would get Outstanding Seed. You know how to
Sure.
use. That's where I do know how to use the computer. I mean, I use it as a research tool, but if you just type those things, they're going to come up and it's going to be there. And yeah.
Okay. I know about the space thing when we're dealing with this particular crop, but I know there's like, for example, I know I have recently visited a couple farms that have extra space. They only flower farm maybe, I don't know, 50% of what they grow or the space that they have, and they have vacant space where they could grow something like that. Are there certain varieties you feel like are easier? I mean, I know like in the South. I know we were joking about this a minute ago about the cucumber beetle, which you guys don't have up there, lucky. And
Right.
but other parts of the country might have other issues. I don't know with mildew or whatever. I'm not sure. But I'm curious if there's certain varieties that you found would be like an easy varieties to start with if you're just trying to grow them for the first time.
Oh, okay. Easy or just like something that's really kind of beautiful to grow and they're going to have a great experience afterwards. Like you're
Yes.
like, wow. Yeah, I would say some of the varieties from Outstanding Seed, I think you're going to have a really great experience with, for sure. Like I think about like I mentioned already, Daybreak. It's a really great pumpkin. People would really like it a lot.
Okay.
Well, it's a beautiful color. I think it's a vigorous plant. Like if you grew Rouge de Tempe, the French, that sometimes is a little bit more of a tricky plant at times to grow. It can be a
Okay.
little bit fussy, for sure.
Well, and that's the thing is sometimes there's so many cool varieties and it's like you hate for your first experience to be a tough one. That's why I was curious.
Polar bear is fun to grow. It's kind of a big white pumpkin. It's big, so it's kind of neat if you grow it right, treat it right. It's going to expand out really wonderfully.
that sounds amazing. A beautiful big white pumpkin.
Yeah, I mean, looks like a full moon.
Sure.
So I think that's pretty cool.
Um, you know, I'm always curious when I talk to flower farmers, like what has been one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome?
Oh, biggest challenges. Like what way? Market wise, growing,
Yes.
both of them?
Yeah,
Well,
I
here,
mean,
what are the problems? I it's just building market and things like that. I don't think it's a lot of fun. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think once you kind of got used to, I think it would be harder for people in the business if to do that direct marketing sales if you didn't, we're not near large urban centers. So like, we're just an hour out from Seattle, and that's the largest population center in the state. And so having that really helps a lot.
Sure, sure. No, I just didn't know being, I mean, I think it's different when you're part of sort of a multi-generational farm because so many things you've already dealt with over time. You've already had, you've already kind of worked through a lot of the beginners kind of processes or issues that people have. And that's why
Right.
and sometimes I wonder though, I feel like with farming, it doesn't matter how long you do it, you still have challenges, whether it's, a recession maybe, or just bad weather, crop failure. Like I'm curious, like for example, if you start having
Oh,
crop
yeah.
issues.
You get a lot of crop failures, and you're always trying to relearn. It's always a moving target for sure. Um, you can't really put together a game plan that's going to provide you with a perfect crop each year because weather's always changing. There's always these variables that are in play that you have to kind of work with or work around, most definitely. And when you're in multi-generational business, sometimes, um, there's pluses to it and then there's minuses to it. Sometimes, the pluses might be, having all that, decades or sometimes centuries of knowledge. But the downsides can be sometimes you're not as enthusiastic. Maybe somebody's going into it, this is what they want to do, they have a passion for it, and so they're diving into it. Sometimes multi-generational businesses sometimes don't always have that. It's just like this is what you do. Kind
Right,
of thing.
exactly. Well, and I think too for you, I mean, I don't know if you're at this point yet, but have you started having conversations about who follows in your footsteps?
A little bit, but not too much yet, because there's just one, my nephew, and he's a firefighter, but he's only 22 and still figuring out things for
Sure,
sure.
sure.
Anyway, we go. Yeah, and then we lived for a long time in our family. So like my mom's 96, my grandfather was 98, and her cousin was 108. So got a lot of years ahead of me.
Of course you do. Of course you do. And
Hopefully, not wood.
yeah. Well, I just know that sometimes with transitioning things, it takes some time anyway. But or you might want to retire at some point. Of course, I feel like a lot of times when you're a farmer, once you're in it, it's hard to get out of it. So it's just part of your nature.
Yeah, I think retirement's more like for people who've worked for like a corporation or things like that, for the most part. And then, you're only because you want it out of there because you've done your thing, your job, and they don't want you there any longer because you're not. I don't know what I mean. So
Yeah.
like farming like that, I think for the most part, always like my grandfather farmed and or worked until he was in his early 90s.
Mm, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my grandfather was quite old when he quit farming as too. So uh, hopefully I got some of those genes as well. I'm curious. I noticed that on Instagram that it looked like you guys do produce some flowers as well.
Oh yeah, I grow flowers for drying for fall wreaths.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Is
sort of yes.
Now I was just curious if that's something that like you only grow for that purpose.
Yes.
And how like what are some of the varieties you grow that really do well for you?
Oh wow. So those are all for the most part geared towards fall colors. Fall wreaths have become really popular with a wide segment of the population. You really can't say who's going to buy one or not. Um, yeah, that's kind of taken off. Dry flowers have taken off again because I think they've been sort of reinterpreted in a different light than they had been in the past. It used to be kind of hokey and kind of country dump, kind of I don't know, kind of a country look to it that's not very sophisticated. But now it's just kind of evolved, and have people from the cities like that wanting to buy these really interesting fall. It's got to be interesting. It's got to have a vibe to it. Wreaths, and so you keep them really straightforward. You don't add cute little sayings to them. You don't add ribbons to them or anything like that at all. It's just about the material. And so some of the things, like drying marigolds, something that takes a little bit process to get them to do that, but they turn out really beautiful. Nigeria turns out really great. The pod on it, for obviously poppies, the pods look really great. There's some really great safflowers that do really well for drying. Millets can be very beautiful. Yeah, dill.
Really?
Even though it's got a fragrance to it, it dries really nicely, and it just adds a great texture to things. So yeah, kind of expanding out into all these sort of different shapes and forms is it's a real plus. Different types of basils dry really well and can be added in, adds texture, adds fragrance to the wreath. And what's great about it is like after it's not plastic. After it's done, you can just store it away if you want to, or if you don't want to, you can compost it or set it afire, and you're done with it. It's just like it's not like you don't have to take it to the landfill.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys use primarily for the base for your wreaths?
Like the grapevines.
Okay. So do you buy those in or do you grow that too?
Yeah, we bring those in. And then this year we have a neighbor that's growing hops. And so they take some of the hop vines and they twist them into wreath forms that we can add additional material into.
I love that idea. I love the texture of hops.
Yeah, and the hop, I don't even call the flower, the seed on it. It's like flower. It's like that little cone shape like a flower. Yeah, it dries beautifully, and we hang the whole hop plants up inside the barns as garlands, and it's a very traditional English thing to do, to hang up, signifying harvest.
Now, one of the trends I've noticed, and you kind of have followed along in this category, I think, is a lot of the bigger farms that used to just be, were just growing so many varieties of things, have definitely niched down and specialized in a crop or two. And I'm wondering, and a lot of times people are afraid to do that because they're afraid they're giving up a part of their income. They're giving up perhaps a part of their customer base that maybe liked whatever that was before. What are your thoughts on this? Because I feel like this is really, and it causes an efficiency in the process. And I'm just curious.
It really depends, I think, because I do know people that seem to grow a lot of different things and do well at it. And it could be their personality, just the energy level they have, and then others, are much more narrow focused in what they do, and they have really good reasons why there's so much more narrow focus for us. I'm more narrow focused. It's just kind of just my nature. It's just. And then how I'm looking at it, I'm looking at it as providing this huge range of pumpkins, just from A to Z and everything in it. So fully invested in it. I think when you have a lot of different things going, you can't be fully invested in that area and then not provide the great. I'm more about getting into those details about things. And but we have a bulb grower next to us, and they're focused in on daffodils and tulips for the most part, and that's what they do, forwards and backwards. And you just have to be, it just takes that amount of time and energy and knowledge. But like I said, then there's other people who have a much wider window in doing things.
Right. Well, but I think too, from the standpoint of like what you do, does it positively impact your overhead because you don't have as much labor year round, or because you don't have all the overhead for year round production because everything.
Yes, you could definitely say that. And we're very targeting in on a time period and things that are going to sell really well. Fall, Halloween has already this sort of built-in cultural thing happening in this country, and so that helps a lot.
That's great. I also feel like um, the reverse side of that is it creates a lot of pressure because all your income comes from a narrow time of the year.
Yes, and right now we're under a lot of pressure. Yeah, I think that's the reason why some people like to diversify more so that everything's not in this one basket. And so yeah, there's all risks involved in everything, I guess. And it's worked out so far.
Knock on wood again.
I have to knock on wood. So far, it's worked out okay. I mean, I'm talking to you and I'm working with Christine. People from Martha Stewart Living called, so.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. Do you ship your product out, or is it all pretty much consumed there regionally?
It's pretty much regionally, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of what you do, and this is one of the things that is a topic that we've covered a little bit in the past, is creating sort of a destination. You're a agritourism place. Curious your thoughts on that, and maybe some tips on creating that destination place for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, that's always kind of a tricky subject, agro-tourism. Because I guess we fit into that category, but I've never thought of us that way, or I don't think that way. So I think that's what I always tell your listeners is one of the most important things is to kind of find your true self and go with that. And there's an authenticity that comes with that. And I think, like I said, that's why the Martha Stewart people called. They could see that this was a real deal situation. And because they were big lovers, they are big lovers of pumpkins and the different varieties like that. And that's why they wanted to contact and talk with me. But yeah, I see it more like, I mean, not as tourists as, like we grow this product and then we put it on display and it's sold. So I don't know, there's a lot of different retails that, I think there's companies in Europe that make beautiful leather shoes, and they put them in their storefronts for sale and people buy them, they showcase them and, or whatever, and I think that's just how I see it, like we're growing stuff and this is the showroom for them. And you're coming in to buy them just like you come into, I mean, I don't, when you go to an auto dealership, is that a tourist destination?
No, but I think though the difference though is I think of like in Georgia where I grew up, and when apple season was around, a lot of times people wanted to go and get, buy their bushels and stuff like that of different flavors of apples for cooking or for eating or for whatever. And I feel like it's a I can see where if there was a place like that, here, it would be a fun thing. It'd be a fun outing. Yes, there's a purpose in it. That purpose is, I want some pumpkins and gourds and what have you for decor, or just because I want to eat them, or because whatever the reason might be. But it's something that is a narrow window of time, and sometimes it's season driven. Oh, it's fall. I mean, we were driving around this morning and I saw these amazing displays with pumpkins and things like that I probably weren't there 2 weeks ago, but now people are, flocking out. They're going out looking for these things because those are the kinds of fun things they like to do.
They're looking to have an experience.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I say. Tourism always seems like it's kind of trying to get you at every corner for $1. And I think, we want to be thinking about giving people an experience. and that overall good feeling about things. And I think any business, well, not any business, I think that's a great thing to do. And yeah, I think that's, and then you become a destination for that. But we definitely become a destination for people who want their beautiful pumpkins at the end of the day. We are here to sell beautiful pumpkins
Yeah,
and
that's
showcase them in any way possible. And people are having that fall experience. Definitely, it's a cultural experience for sure. Just like Christmas is and Thanksgiving is and 4th of July.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I feel like with with all the years of experience that you've kind of grown up through and in, I'm wondering if there might be sort of a piece of advice that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Piece of advice. I think just be who you are. Isn't that the best? People have heard that so many times, but it's so true to be just really honest about what you're doing and really enjoy it. Don't look, the money will come if you have the love for it and showing this beautiful quality and about it. And then all the rest of it will work out. But if you're coming at it the other way, it's like, oh, I'm gonna make a lot of money at this. It's gonna send out the wrong vibe.
Yeah, I can totally see that. One of the things I was just thinking about you saying that, I know with designers and people using decor and things like that, I'm curious
Yes.
about varieties that do have a long shelf life for those purposes. Like an event venue that maybe is trying to incorporate these products into their decor. You don't want to pick the wrong varieties, let's say. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on varieties that last a long time.
Well, I think they're all going to work out pretty well. All the varieties for those kind of events. There's nothing that's going to give out really quickly. It's just people just have to understand there's like a really great wide selection of colors now. Based on the grower and based on your region, things like that. Definitely your supply chain, but there is all these different colorations out there, and so it creates a lot of different opportunity for you to kind of create a wide range of spectrums of colors and things like that, and shapes and forms for your tablescapes and your overall decor inside your house. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I would always, like I said, once again, it really depends on your region where you're at. Here, you just don't want to push it too early on buying a pumpkin or squash because it might not be ripe enough yet. That could be sometimes maybe a problem. Like everyone, it's like there's already Christmas at Costco. It's kind of like, I mean, there's probably the biggest snafu. It's like I think Thanksgiving's become the forgotten season holiday,
Uh,
or decor or things like that. Or November becomes this sort of I don't know. I just like Christmas starts the day after Halloween's over.
yeah, I agree. Well, I'm
And then
curious.
that's really bad for mums. There's all those beautiful exhibition style mums that you don't see that much anymore. But boy, are they incredibly beautiful and interesting. But I don't know how it is down there, but here, they don't, for the most part, come into bloom until November.
Yeah,
And the month of November tends to be their season. And a lot of those spider ones and things like that are pretty great.
yeah, I agree. You brought up a great point that I think I know I can't think of anyone better to ask this question of. You said, making sure you select pumpkins that are ready, that aren't picked early, for example. How do you tell? How can you tell when you get your pumpkin or you're looking?
Like on a squash, it's really easy to tell. Oftentimes, unless that squash, especially like an acorn, has been sitting higher up on the plant on top of another acorn, wherever they've been hit touching on the ground, and you flip it over so there's that spot, and kind of a bright yellow to bright orangey yellow spot tells you that is ripe. that's a much more ripened fruit than if you see sort of a yellowy green look.
So you're looking for where it was resting, basically, and
Yeah, a lot of things like that. Yeah, you can flip. Not always, because plant structure and where the fruit sits can be different. But a lot of times, if the fruit's been sitting on the ground, especially like the French pumpkin like that, you'll see a brilliant colored marking on it. But that's one of the best ways to tell. Like delicata squash too is that way. You want to see like in that striping some really deep yellowy orange striping happening, especially when you flip it over. If it looks kind of, like lime green still, boy, it's been picked too early.
Do you ever grow any of those gigantic pumpkins?
No, I haven't. Or I've tried kind of, that's a lie. But I, blessings and great dedication to those who do, because I think that's like an investment of the whole summer to make that happen. Those people really do invest a lot of time and energy into them.
Do they take the same amount of time to grow, or do they take more time because of size?
I think they take more time. I think they start them earlier. Yeah, I think that they start those things back like probably March and April. Of course, now you're gonna have a reader say like, "That's not true." We start them, but I think it is early, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine having to get forklifts to move them and all that kind of craziness. So,
Right?
Yeah.
But a polar bear pumpkin is a fun one to grow. And, it gets a nice full moon shape, and that's something people could do and be very doable for most people. And they go like, oh, wow, this is, like one that you could still pick up.
Right. Exactly. And when you're growing white pumpkins, do you have to be careful of anything like their skin, like turning or do they get nicked?
Yeah, it could be varietal. There's some, because they will talk about in catalogs, because there have been in the past, I don't see it too much anymore, white pumpkins that will turn, used to be, I think it's probably still in the marketplace. I've never looked anymore because they stopped growing it. It is called cotton candy, a white pumpkin. And it is a very uniform shape, nice stem on it. But boy, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's turned lemon yellow. It just goes to this kind of pale, like lemon yellow color. And then once it's turned that, nobody wants it.
Yeah, I can see.
But there are other whites, like the polar bear, I think White Delight, the Blanchos, like that, flat white stacker, they all keep a really nice white color. They don't turn. That's the other thing. Is like, well, there's, God, I can't even think of the name because I only grew it once, just a few of them, and boy, that was like a yellow pumpkin, like the raw yellow can be a really hard sell.
There's a lot of flowers that I think that yellow can be a hard sell. It's got to be the right shade of yellow if you're going to do it.
Right. I mean, outside of sunflowers, it's like, but like a certain kind of yellow pumpkin showed up. It's just like, okay. It's like, well, no, it never moved.
Oh, wow. I guess you learned that way. That's the hard way.
Well, and I looked at it too, and I'm like, boy, I don't know what to put that with. It's like a school bus.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Warning sign, like warning.
You can line the drive to keep the cars, in the right place.
Oh, yeah, land the airplane here.
That's hilarious. I love it. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for this time. It's been great to dive deep into the world of pumpkins.
Wow, I was just excited to be here, and the time flew.
It does. Always does.
It always does.